Okay.
Let me maybe just kind of introduce what I'm going to do this morning for a few minutes. I asked Ms. Dula and Ms. Fox to put together some information for you all. So if it suits you, I'll have her go ahead and present kind of where we are, what's in your code presently. Ms. Fox has done some survey work in terms of what do other communities do. Has quite a bit of information there, so if it suits the committee, go ahead and call on Ms. Dula to start the presentation.
Good morning, Mayor Wright and Alder Persons Fox and Patton, and City Manager McNeil. We're just going to do a very brief presentation that was put together by staff, Ms. Fox, also with the assistance of our city clerk and executive assistant Sarah Principe, pulling some information. Basically, this is the mission that was determined for the subcommittee at the December 18th meeting to decide the language for getting citizens' input at the beginning of the meeting. And this is the language, this is taken directly from the minutes of that meeting. You have in your packet of information a timeline of events. This is related to public comment over the past several years. And I'll preface this by saying this information was, of course, pulled from minutes and interpreted by staff members. Therefore, if there's anything that's incorrect in the timeline, it's not deliberately incorrect. It's because we were not there. We've had to interpret information, again, pulled from the minutes. So if you have information or a correction to make, certainly we welcome you to do that. I'm going to break this down very briefly. During 1981 and 1984, the Code of Ordinances in 1981, I think it was just a basic overhaul, revamping. And then in 1984, what was particularly amended was Section 3.21 of the Charter, which is on the next slide. In August of 1984, let's see if I can find it. Oh, there it is. This sentence here regarding called meetings or special called meetings, the language right here, it used to read 12 hours. And that was deleted and replaced with 48 hours. That notice had to be given not less than 48 hours. And this was done in September of 1984. In 1988,
98.
I mean, 98. Well, 88 was a good year too. But 1998, thank you. Amendments were actually made to the charter as well as to the ordinance. Specifically, rules of procedure for council were adopted. And these included rules related to the types of meetings, included regular meetings, special meetings, emergency meetings, the agenda, and related to the agenda specifically, placing items on the agenda, how that was to be done. Consent agenda was to be enacted in one motion with no separate discussion. A policy requiring first and second readings for most items. Let's see. Public hearings format was a part of this. Rules of procedure. The agenda format, which is Section 2-55 of the Code of Ordinances, and public address to council. Specifically, citizens were to call the clerk or city manager's office by 5 p.m. the Wednesday before a council meeting and request to be placed on the agenda, stating the topic and the general content of their remarks, with the item was to be placed under recognition of persons to be heard. Sections 3.21b was amended with that language, as well as Section 2-55 A included the same language. And that's the language related to here, a request, this second sentence. Must be received by the city clerk by 5 p.m. This language was put in the charter, section 3.21, as well as section 255, which is in the Code of Ordinances. Then in 2003, a citizen requested to speak about open meetings, and the proposal was that council consider having a time for citizen questions and comments at the end of the agenda. Alderwoman Fox volunteered to work with the city attorney's office with Mr. Crone on such a proposal. Up to this time, there was a place for citizens to speak, but council could vote on whether to allow a person to speak or not. And this was a request to consider placing a comment period towards the end of the agenda. And this proposal was presented at the May 6th meeting in 2003. The proposal as presented at that time was not adopted, and actually that vote was voted down.
I believe, could I interrupt you?
Sure.
This is a work session.
Yeah.
I believe that came immediately after Mr. Larry Pope had requested to speak to council and we had denied his request by vote.
That's correct. The citizen had requested to speak, and that was denied. And then another citizen requested to speak about open meetings and public comment as a result of that.
But earlier, I don't know what date that was, but sometime before, Mr. Burry, you were manager there, weren't you?
No, I started in August of 2003.
But Mr. Pope had requested to speak, and I don't know what the vote was. I remember I voted to let him speak.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how the rest of the votes went. But my recollection is very clear that he asked to speak, and we voted not to let him speak.
That's right.
We didn't have the minutes.
Kersher came forward and asked about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, we did not pull those minutes. I mean, it's indicated in the minutes where Dr. Kersher requested to speak on open meetings as a result of that event, but we don't have the specific minutes from the meeting where we weren't even sure who the citizen was. It just said a citizen in the minutes we pulled.
You didn't have it or didn't find it?
We didn't look for that specific information.
Okay.
No, we were looking specifically for information related to public comment and how the times that council had addressed public comment before council.
I guess the point I wanted to make is, at any time there's been an issue concerning people's right to speak, I think we have addressed that.
Yes, as the timeline has shown, public comment has been addressed numerous times by council over the past several years.
Well, you know, I'm fairly cloudy on that one since I seem to have been involved in that. I'm going to just make a point here. I've read Larry's letter here. I've always been an advocate for opening up meetings. So I don't know what my reasoning was other than the whole conversation about people staying through the meeting. And that's been a pretty important factor with me, is that people sit through the meetings. Every group for 20 years that I advised that came down here, the first thing I always said to them was, stay in the entire meeting, because when you get up and leave after your issue, it shows that you are only interested in your issue. So I'm going to, since I've seen to be right there, I feel certain that that was why I did what I did.
Yes.
To encourage these people to sit through a meeting and learn what else is going on.
But that's typically not, I mean, even now, that's not
People
what
speak
happens.
away.
And it's, I
Well-
think people should sit through the whole meeting, but that's their choice not to.
Well, I'm a little bit cloudy on this one.
I do recall that being a concern. People were
They get up and leave.
Yeah.
going to leave.
Yeah, and and that's always been huge with me. I mean,
And I think that's a valid point. I think if somebody wants to come and speak to this council, unless it requires that they speak before the matter is on the agenda, then, as we presently do, they attend our meeting, they're respectful during the meeting, and then they get their opportunity to speak.
Well, you know, I guess in looking back, you can't tie people's hands and make them sit through a meeting if they're gonna just come down here on an issue or speak their mind and get up and leave. And I guess I realize that now. I maybe didn't realize that when I was doing this, but I'm not gonna, this sort of bothers me a little bit because I'm a little bit hazy on what would have prompted me to do this, because this is contrary to how I believe activists ought to work.
But I have heard you, Mrs. Fox, say several times, including in this public session, you have said, made comments about people making their points and leaving.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean,
I've heard it over and over, and we see the same thing at all of our meetings. Each group gets their piece.
But I think the way we're doing it now, if they have a need to speak early in the meeting, we have been giving them that right. And if they don't have a need to speak early in the meeting, then they understand, as does everyone else, that there's an order to it, and they'll speak at the end of the meeting.
But I think part of the perception is, even though we know that there is an opportunity for anyone to speak once the agenda is out Friday afternoon, they have Friday afternoon, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday to contact any of us, but there is not a public forum for them to speak about the agenda. And I think that's the rub, is they don't want to speak directly to us, and to find out the background, it's to come and speak publicly, which is their right to do. But I do think if most would contact one of us, as they have done in the past, get the background information. If we don't have it, then we have time to get with staff and Nick to find out and get back to and it might solve a problem rather than a citizen having to come down and ask it, and it's a public comment where there's no give and take. That is their opportunity to get us really involved and to hear what their concern is, get the background information.
So we're going to have give and take?
Well,
I'm just saying that is, in my opinion, when Friday afternoon that agenda comes out, that gives a citizen the opportunity to discuss it with us to gather information and have give and take.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
But
if they come and meet here, if they come and stand up here right to start the meeting, there's no give and take.
There's no give and take. Well, and that's where I think some of the latitude is going to be lost if we do, but then if there is that perception, there is not a public forum for them to comment ahead of time.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't mean to get us
Sorry.
into discussion. You go
That's
over what
okay.
you've done.
No, this is fine.
Well, I do hope that the people here understand that this has not been decided in the back room or something. We are talking about it for the first time.
Okay. Just a few more slides. If you would like, I mean, I can share with you what was in the proposal from 2003 if you want me to, or no?
No.
Okay. All right.
That's how.
And then in 2005, the General Assembly enacted Session Law 200-170. This is codified as 168-81.1 for municipalities, and that statute was amended, basically requiring or mandating city councils, county commissioners, boards, and boards of education to provide at least one public comment period per month in a regular meeting of the board, because prior to this, it was up to each board as to whether or not they allow public comment. There was no statutory mandate that a public comment period be offered. In fact, a board or a council did not have to offer a public comment period at all prior to 2005. But I think many did, as did this council, offered a period or time for public comment for citizens, but it wasn't required. So the council determined that the city was already in compliance with the new statute because citizens were offered opportunity to make public comment. A policy was presented in 2005 to clarify the rules and regulations addressing when an individual wishes to address council. And this policy concerning public address to council, it was amended during the meeting, and council adopted the amended policy, which became effective September 6, 2005. And that policy, that's the legislation actually, but here's the policy that was adopted, that is a part of your packet. And it has six paragraphs or 6 procedures. That the public comment period was to be during the person's requesting to be heard. People were encouraged to fill out the form prior to the meeting, stating their name and topic. 3-minute time limit, and requirement of people speaking from the podium. The speaker was to address the council, but there was to be no dialogue between council and the speaker. And but the mayor or other presiding officer could respond to the speaker if at all. And of course, rules of decorum, the rules are set forth in the public hearing section in the code. Of course, requiring people to basically behave when they're speaking. And then rule number 6, at the discretion of the majority of council, a speaker may be allowed to speak at other times during the meeting with respect to a specific item on the agenda. And as I said, this was adopted in 2005. Put it in place. And then, of course, during the course of this year, it's in 2011 as well, this issue of public comment and input was to be given by citizens. It's been discussed at various meetings and commented on by various citizens. And of course, that brings us to this point in December. Of course, the subcommittee was set up to further discuss the issue. Now, this part of the presentation, I'm going to actually turn over to Yade.
Good morning. During our research, we went through several minutes from the past since August of 1998 to December of 2012. And the reason why we targeted August of 1998 was simply because that's when we did the rules of procedure, when they were adopted and became effective. And so we just kind of started from that point forward. We also reviewed 51 different local government entities as to when they host their public comment period. 49 of them are in North Carolina and 2 of them are out of state. You should see in your packet some of the information that we found. Since August 4th, 1998, there have been 328 regular meetings held, and of those meetings, 144 had persons requesting to speak, which was 44%, and 184 of them had no persons requesting to speak, which was 56%. Of those 398 meetings, there were a total of 290 comments made. 96 of them were actually related to a specific item on the agenda, where 194 of them were not. And then on this final slide from the actual minutes that we pulled, out of the 290 comments, there were 26 requests to speak before a vote. 7 of them were denied, 11 of those requests were approved, and 8 people were asked to speak by council's request. And then finally, in our research, we found that there was no statewide research on local government agencies as to when they host their public comment period, so that's why we went through and actually just asked for some input from other local governments, as well as just checking several ones that you guys had actually mentioned and requested us to review. So we reviewed 49 localities in North Carolina. 2 of them were outside, Chattanooga, Tennessee, and Greenville, South Carolina, for a total of 51 local governments that we reviewed. And of those, 47% of them were at the beginning, based off of when they do their business items or consent agenda items. 19% were in the middle, and 26% were afterwards. There were several that actually had an any time in between, which was 5%, and then there was 3 of them that actually did something in the regular meeting, as well as doing something designated outside of the meeting, whether it was a public comment forum or a citizen forum, you name it, they did it along with what they did in the regular meetings.
And I do want to point
Is
out,
there something, I'm mistaken, that red bullet after and then before business item?
I'm sorry?
The red dot,
Right.
should that be after business items or consent?
It is, I'm
Okay.
sorry, I meant to change that. It should say after business items or consent agenda items.
and I do want to point out, I'm the one that asked for the 2 out of state, just because we had gone for the inspired spaces. It would be interesting to see what cities we had looked at for one.
And what did they do?
I believe theirs was at the end.
At the end.
Yeah, it's actually there, you should
I guess
have.
we have definitely concluded that at the end is not wrong.
I can double check that for you. It should be in, there's
It's in
in
the
your packet,
spreadsheet.
there's a full listing of everyone's public comment period. And their public comment period is noted in red, so it's easy to spot in the placement of their agenda. One thing we did notice was that there was no one particular same thing for everybody. They may have had a different structure, but they may have had their public comment period just placed intermixed. Also, we did find that there were a couple of localities that had more than one public comment period that occurred at a different time in their agenda. So there was actually 4 of them that were actually this way. And there were 2 actually local government, localities that actually had a designated time in addition to that hosted the citizen forum and the council workshop session where they actually had a moment for people to speak on public comment. Are there any questions about the research? Okay.
That was a lot of research work. Thank you very much.
It sure condenses into a little tiny pie chart.
A lot of research, thank you.
And now we get to the fun part. Fun for you, that is. Now it's considering options. And these are just presented. Again, these are just some options to consider. By no means are these necessarily staff recommendations, although there is one that...
Yes, I'm sorry, Mrs. Could we just get a page of the most recent agenda, or any agenda? I just want to see the first page.
You have it on the back.
That's on the back?
What I've given you. It's on the very back. It's on the very back.
Oh, that's the page of the most, of a recent agenda?
Yeah.
Yeah. It was January 17th.
Oh, okay, good. We got it, thank you.
First of all, just to speak as to what is currently in existence. Currently in existence, in section 2-55B of the code, the order of items on the agenda is set out, with persons requesting to be heard placed near the end. Also, still in effect is policy 05-06. That was the policy that was adopted and put into effect in September 2005. So actually, both things are still in play. So here's some considerations or some options to consider. One, of course, would be to not change anything. Public comment occurs during the agenda item recognition of persons requesting to be heard. And then, as I just stated, policy 05-06 is still in place. And if you recall, item number 6, at the discretion of council, persons can be allowed to speak at other times during the meeting with regard to an item on the agenda. So those things are still in place. That's one option. Don't change anything. Leave it as is.
So what we have been doing has been in here.
Yeah.
Yes, it's in the
So
policy.
we're fine, so it's
Your
nothing.
policy, that
wrong
number
with
6
it.
basically says that the
Okay.
majority of council wants
Which is
anybody
what
to
we have been
speak on an agenda item, they can ask them, they can let them
That's
speak.
what we've been doing.
That's what you've been practicing.
Okay.
Another option to consider would be to amend the policy, that is 05-06, to designate a specific place in the agenda for public comment on agenda items. The recognition of persons requesting to be heard remains the same on the agenda. So in essence, you've created a separate formal public comment period designated where it would be, whether it would be at the beginning, in the middle, but you would also have the persons requesting to be heard. So you'd have 2 comment periods.
In effect, that's just kind of, in my view, an extension of your existing policy, because right now there's just no placeholder for it in the agenda, but your policy clearly states that anyone could make a motion to say, let's have a, let's let someone speak on this agenda item or before any of the agenda items. So it would really just be, one more progression, if you will, of your existing policy.
Yeah, this to amend it again would be basically designating one place rather than the current policy allows it for persons to speak at the discretion of council anywhere. But this would be designated again, say at the beginning. Number 3, this is sort of another option for you to consider, where you create a new policy specifically related to public comment on items on the agenda, and you amend a policy 05-06 as well. So you'd have 2 policies in place, plus you'd also have persons requesting to be heard, recognition of persons requesting to be heard. That still would be a part of the agenda. So this allows you just to do something totally different policy-wise. And then another possible option, you amend section 2-56B of the agenda in the Code of Ordinances and policy 05-06. Okay, hold on just a second. This particular option is one that City Attorney John Crum addressed in a meeting, and this would be moving the persons requesting to be heard to an earlier place in the agenda.
That would be number 4.
You would have one public comment period. People would speak on anything. Item on the agenda, item not on the agenda. And it would also require amending policy 05-06, particularly removing number 6, probably deleting 6, which allows people to speak at any point in time, or possibly deleting number 6, which at the discretion of council, persons can be allowed to speak at other times during the meeting. But this basically is just one.
But why would we eliminate that?
Pardon?
Why would we ever eliminate that?
Eliminate what?
The right of a person to speak at any time?
You would move it to the front end.
But what if they decide to speak later and they
You
didn't
just
know they wanted
clean
to
it
speak?
up.
Oh, and let me preface it by saying these are not, now don't get me wrong, we're not saying this is what you need to do. This is just some
Well, you
considerations.
mentioned Mr. Crom's name in that, so
He just said this was one of the ones that he touched upon when we met.
the point I'm making is, I would be receptive on a limited basis. I would be receptive to having the authority as a council to allow someone who failed to speak and then decided they desperately needed to speak. I'd like to have the flexibility to be able to allow them to do so, or to deny it. If we if we adopt number 4, I don't think we could ever say, you now, yes sir, I understand you'd like to speak. We could have somebody say, I have urgent information to add to this. We might say, well, why don't you tell Mr. Burry, and we'll see if that's worthy of council consideration. I want these meetings to have as much protocol and decorum, at the same time allowing people to speak about what's on their minds. I want to be the most open council in the United States.
They can do that.
Well, but I thought you said if we took 06 out, that took away that ability.
That's a possibility. I didn't.
So it's just
You could.
these the rest of the options.
No, these are just clarifications, just stuff to consider as you are discussing this. Keep in mind again what's already in place. You have the policy of 5-06, and then you have the ordinance. And in the ordinance, you have the person's recognition of persons requesting to be heard, where that's placed on the agenda. Then another item, of course, is matters not on the agenda, which requires a majority of council to vote, which even during this period of time, a council member could move to permit a person to even speak then. And that's now. You can do that now, even though it's a matter that's not under matters not on the agenda. So there are multiple opportunities right now for a person to speak in accordance with the agenda outline and also in accordance with 05-06, which does give you discretion to permit people to speak at other times.
But I don't want it to be a discretion. My personal feeling is that it should not be at the discretion of council for someone to speak. If we're going to move this comment period to the beginning, that should be set. It's not, because after this council is dead and gone, it might come a council that says, no, they don't want to speak. And I think that right should be in our procedures for them to speak rather than be at our discretion.
If I may just get through a couple more slides and then we can totally get out of the way and allow you all to discuss. The other thing to consider is the time frame. If you determine that you want to amend the policy, or you want to adopt a new rule, or you want to amend the code of ordinances, and let's go through that very quickly. Should be something here. And this is information you've already seen. You have the policy, the hard copies in your packet as well. The statute.
That's right. Quick one time, I forget.
Oh, yes, thank you. Here you go. If you're going to amend anything, this is in Charter Section 3.21. No council rule concerning the conduct of meetings may be adopted, amended, or repealed unless upon less than 30 days' notice presented at a regular meeting of the council, such notice to be recorded in the minutes of that meeting. So, if there is an official amendment to anything, you have to give 30 days' notice at a regular meeting. And then at a subsequent meeting, 30 days later, at least 30 days later, the actual amendment can take place. Also,
So that's what will happen here, right? If we'll
you
make a
choose that.
recommendation tomorrow night and it takes 30 days to be effective?
well, it depends on what your recommendation is. If your recommendation is to amend, say, the code of ordinances, the order of items on the agenda, if that's part of your recommendation, that would fall under this. If your recommendation is to amend policy 05-06, yes, the 30-day notice. Also, keep in mind, for ordinances, of which 255, this is in the Code of Ordinances. If you're called, the practice of council is to actually call for a public hearing, hold a public hearing, and also notice of that hearing has to be published in the newspaper. This is for ordinances. So all of that has to be taken into consideration within that 30-day time frame. So bottom line, you couldn't recommend something tomorrow and it's in place. Tomorrow you couldn't. You can make the recommendation, but no amendments could be made, officially made, without this procedure being followed. I think this ends our part of the presentation. If you have any questions, I'll certainly be glad to try to answer them.
Well, I don't have any questions, but I want to thank both of you for the work that you've done.
Oh, this one right here. And then down here.
Thank you very
I'm
much.
just the talking head.
Oh, thank you.
Lots of research, thank you.
I did put at each person's place after much thought about this. I've been doing this thinking about this. I think there's nothing wrong with change. And so I have attached the front page of an agenda.
Are we gonna let citizens speak, or?
Yeah. Oh,
I thought we were gonna let citizens.
okay.
Okay. Is there any citizen present who would like to speak on this matter?
I'd like to speak.
My address is 2442 23rd Street Drive Northeast, and I also represent the property at 443 Second Avenue Southwest. I'm on y'all's side about this as far as the grandstanding at the beginning of the meetings. I understand the reservations that you have according to that. And I do believe that it would be good for you to set a time limit and for you to make sure that citizens do adhere to that time limit. You know, and I agree with you, Mr. Mayor, that they do need to stick to the subject, and I would like to see the citizens requesting to be heard remain at the end of the meeting for those people that don't speak to an item on the agenda that deals with matters on the agenda currently. And I think that's the reason why you have matters on the agenda. Okay, matters not on the agenda at the end of the meetings, for people to come in here and speak about something that has nothing to do with what's currently on the agenda. So I don't want people to come in here at the end of a meeting and speak about apples and oranges at the end of the meeting. I want them to speak about matters that are on the agenda at the beginning of the meeting. But the one thing is this may throw a wrench into some of the issues, but I don't think 3 minutes is enough for somebody, if it's a complicated issue at the beginning of the meeting, to be able to speak to something that might be one of these technical details about a money issue or a money matter, business matter that's on the agenda. So if you could stretch that out to 5 minutes, they might not need 5 minutes, but and you can call them out of order if they get up here and turn it into a 20-minute session at the beginning of the meeting. Of course, that's up to your discretion. And that's what I would like to say.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Is there anyone else present who would like to speak?
Mr. Mayor, just point out.
We do have another question.
I'm Don Norwood, 1976 10th Street Boulevard Drive, Northwest. This is going to be different, Mayor. Since you guys haven't really discussed it yet, I'd almost like to suggest that maybe there could be some comments after you've discussed it in case something comes up that none of us have thought about. But so far, I don't have anything to add. Thank you.
We're going to ask for public comment again. Okay.
Just to point out, Mr. Pope came by earlier today. I believe he dropped off a letter with his comments that each of y'all have.
Does this become a public record?
I want to address one thing. I think 3 minutes, as long as I have been involved, 3 minutes is an adequate thing. It is, then it puts a limit and it keeps with the quorum of our meetings that we do have the option of, let me finish.
Well, this is not the subject of this meeting.
Correct, but I'm saying that is part of that language, that they have 3 minutes and we can, in fact, vote to have this.
No, I thought the council clarified at our last meeting, the subject of this meeting is the order of the agenda.
That's part of the order, because it's in here, 0506, number 3.
The order of the agenda was the only thing requested of us by the
This is what we would be amending.
chamber, by the council.
This is what we would be amending.
They didn't even mention that.
Well,
I mentioned it.
since I was interrupted, I'd like to go on with what I have on my sheet. I went back and I got the first page of the agendas, and call to order, invocation, and pledge of allegiance is always the same. So it's going to be my recommendation, after a lot of thought, that item 4 read public comment, and that this comment time would allow citizens to speak concerning anything on their mind, address concerns on second readings, consent agenda unless their comments pertain to an advertised public hearing. The public hearing comments would remain the same. Citizens would be advised to speak in the time frame allotted for citizen comments on an advertised public hearing. So the public hearing citizen input will remain the same, but we would move everything to item 4 under public comment. And they would speak to whatever's on the agenda and whatever is on their mind. And under the public comment time, the time frame would be limited to 3 minutes unless the entire council voted to allow an additional 3 minutes. And I look at it this way. This cleans this up. It gives us one frame during the meeting to hear public comment, and I think it's fair, not only to the people in the audience, but it's also fair to council. So that's sort of where I am.
I like your policy, but I do not want to go away from 05, 06, number 6, that at the end, if someone does have a burning desire that just they can't stand it, we could vote to let them speak. But I agree, moving everything up to the beginning of the meeting, hold it to 3 minutes. We can vote if they want, if we have the majority of council to give them 3 additional minutes, and then it's done. They have their opportunity to speak.
Let me talk about 3 minutes. There has been a burning personal agenda by some people to force whoever's presiding at this meeting to loudly interrupt the speaker when the clerk says 3 minutes. Loudly interrupt the speaker and say, do we have a motion to allow this person to speak longer? I've been mayor 11 years. I don't know what the previous mayor did. I do know that the people I talked with around this area who preside over meetings, they don't have time limit rules. I don't know what they would do if they got into a problem. But in 11 years, I estimate that letting people speak longer than 3 minutes has cost me about 240 minutes. That's 2 hours in 11 years that I have devoted 3,000 or 4,000 hours to this job. I think it creates a kind meeting when the person standing in front of us knows that as long as they stay reasonably within the normal rules of decorum, and they don't filibuster, and they're not, for example, we had one citizen come to the front of the council chambers, got up right up there, and said, I'm going to talk as long as I want to. That gentleman was told, first of all, we declare a recess. Then the gentleman was told, you have 1 minute. That was the only time we've had an issue about this in the 11 years. Typically what happens is this. The person is typically, at least half the time, a citizen who doesn't normally appear before us to speak. They're a person who normally doesn't have public speaking skills and they don't have prepared comments. They get up there and they start speaking. And they hear the 3 minutes, because we call 3 minutes, 6 minutes, 9 minutes, and 12 minutes to let people know that there is, out there somewhere, there's a time factor involved in this. And generally what happens is the person hears the 3 minutes and they get this, or sometimes are you wrapping up? And they continue and they wrap up and they sit down and they leave with a very good feeling about their experience. That's why I have said, it ain't broke, don't fix it. And for the life of me, I can't understand why this keeps coming up. It specifically is not a topic of this meeting. I clarified that with the council at the last meeting. I asked specifically, is there anything on this agenda except the order of speaking? And I'm certain that the minutes will reflect that the answer was, that's the only thing on the agenda. I am very prepared to resolve the matter of the order of the things on the agenda, because I am going to take credit for this. I felt we needed to change a couple of things, so I took it on myself to make the motion. So I'm ready to fix that. But I think until somebody can tell me that 240 minutes in 11 years is some kind of an inconvenience and it's some kind of an unfair treatment of city council, I'm just going to be opposed to getting any more specific than that.
It's already in our ordinance.
Every council member, we know that every council member at any time can speak up, in my opinion, can speak up and say, Mr. Mayor, I would like to take a vote on whether this person can continue. I don't think it's fair that I'm the only person up here who has to interrupt somebody if I don't want to.
It's the point
But
of
you all
order,
can.
Woody. It's just the point of order
That needs to
that
be.
the rest of the council is elected to.
And you have the right to interrupt somebody.
But it's up to you to defer, to respect the rest of the council as to whether we're going to give somebody 3 minutes, 6 minutes, 9 minutes, or 12.
Well, that's not a subject of this meeting.
It's part, I believe it's part of Mrs. Fox's.
I'd like to make a motion that we continue to do what we've been doing, except we add to the agenda under item 3. That's not either 3 or 4. We add to that, at this point, a council member may make the motion to allow public comment on any specific items on the agenda, subject to the normal rules of the court. That covers minutes, it covers second readings, it covers consent agenda, it covers department reports, everything except public hearing.
Are you going to call for that?
I make the motion, I'm waiting for a second. Huh?
I guess it fails.
So that died for lack of a second.
Yes. Do you want to make the resolution motion?
I made my motion.
Well, as a point of order, I would declare that the matter of the 3 minutes is out of order and not the subject of this charge by the council.
So do you want to call for that vote?
Well, I'm going to, okay, I don't know that, I think, can the chairman of the committee just declare something? Can the chairman of a meeting, presiding officer, declare something out of order?
Declare something out of order?
Out of order?
Well, the motion is on the floor. Okay, under my understanding of Robert's Rules of Order, parliamentary procedure, the motion, as she stated it, is on the floor. I don't know if there's been a second.
I was, if I want to amend her motion, do I need to second hers and then propose the amendment?
It would be cleaner
Okay,
to,
I second Mrs. Fox's proposal.
and that's the motion that's presented. Then from there, you have to make a determination.
And then I would like to propose an amendment that we keep 0506.
Well, I'm reluctantly, if I may.
I'm making an amendment that we keep the 05066, that at discretion, we may allow someone to speak at other times during the meeting with a specific item on the agenda, but to change that to other comments so that if someone does at the end of the meeting have a burning desire to speak of something that came up in the meeting, then they have that opportunity, and we do, just as we have been, of voting to allow them to speak with majority of council.
And that is probably going to be a fairly rare occasion because there may be someone that has something they want to add to something when the discussion's going on. Well, I would second that.
Well, I would like to make it very clear that I am in favor of more, not less citizen input. I'm in favor of doing so generally at the convenience of the citizen and not council. I recognize that council has rights as well as citizens. I believe that this meeting has been taken in a direction that was not called for by the council, and as a result, I am going to withdraw from this committee. I did not ask to serve, I was asked to serve. And I am convinced that we're heading into a direction that nothing doesn't need to be gone into, and I am going to withdraw from the committee. And we'll turn it over, I guess, to the senior council member, Mrs. Fox.
Well, I'm just going to respond to one thing. I think and I can speak for myself as a council person, I came from a seat in that audience. I was an activist. I know about honoring 3 minutes. I know about public speaking, and I know about honoring the way the agenda is laid out. I served under 2 mayors. And if you have the policy and citizens understand the policy, it makes for a better meeting. There is nothing in my makeup that is not geared to hearing citizens. That has always been what I'm about. And so I don't want it insinuated that I'm not about citizen input, because I am.
And I also came from a seat in the audience, and we, through the entire ordeal, respected council, kept it 3 minutes. If we ran over, council was gracious enough to vote, but it did clean up the meeting, it kept them tighter, and I don't ever remember us being refused not to have additional time, but it does set the stage for a respectful meeting, and it then calls on us and the public to be aware of the rules and follow them. So you're going to vote with the 2 of us?
Yes.
What's that?
We've had a motion and a second on both. Do we vote?
Yeah, that's what Ms. Bill and I were just talking about. I think we're under the opinion that since there is still a majority of the committee doing the work of the meeting at the moment, that you could probably make your vote, and that would be your recommendation from 2 of the 3 members of the committee.
All in favor of the recommendation with Mrs. Patton's amendment? Please say aye.
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 Opposed?
Opposed? Motion passes.
So this will then go to council for tomorrow night.
Yeah. I mean, there's a placeholder on the agenda for this committee to report back on this meeting, so we've got the motion. The council can take it up tomorrow.
Got the motion and the amendment.
Yeah, that's what I meant, the amended motion that y'all just voted on.
I will declare the committee is over.
So hard for you.
I was just making sure the second presentation was on the web. I mean, not web, but
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's part of the policy, it's not out.
First with the policy.
That's what
And
I was.
to be permitted to
I'll see you
I'm not
Wednesday.
right. You are.
It's a public thing. It's just like you got a constitution, you have rules. That's right.
And everybody knows the rules and not making a litigation.
That's right. You know, I didn't relish that night that I came down here and pulled Larry out of here, you know.
He should be happy along with it.
I know, but you know what? If you sit there and talk to him, he's not that guy.
He's not. That's the point.
I know, because this isn't a show.
But he
It's
should
not
have
Harmon
the
Battery
respect.
Circus.
And exactly, but he should also have the courtesy to speak to us as individuals rather than adversarial all the time.
I know.
It's disappointing. Ready?
That's something special.